Hello everyone. Sorry for the long wait. I had like 4 exams in a row for the past 2 weeks. Very different subjects as well, to not help. So I kind of had to focus on that quite a lot, unfortunately. But hopefully people will get used to it for as long as I'm a student. Anyway, let's get to the core of the video. So, a lot of Marxists love to talk about dialectical and historical materialism these days, but funnily enough, I rarely see them actually using it. And I'm far from being a Marxist. Even though I explained how my transhumanist beliefs arise as an extension of the notion of liberté réelle from French Marxist terminology, as well as having quoted Marx multiple times in our videos, I'm still pretty much what one could call an anarcho-communist. Today, I'm definitely not gonna improve my case here, however, because I'm actually going to apply dialectical and historical materialism, specifically to bet on the future of robot rights. I have a funny feeling that these mini videos are going to mainly be applications of theoretical tools that I may or may not have presented or criticized earlier. Let me be clear, I'm gonna make two assumptions which I think are not too unreasonable. First, I will suppose that capitalism is still in place, or even devolve to semi-soft fascism for the time I will cover in the scenario I'm proposing. Secondly, I will suppose that humans won't go extinct anytime in this window of time as well. If the first proposition is wrong, aka if we reach socialism in the next few decades, although I doubt it, the scenario will obviously be very different, and probably for the better, but it seems like a very unlikely assumption, unfortunately. So, let's begin. So, to this day, wide ranges of industries and institutions have the incentive to pay their workforce less while demanding them to be more productive. There's obviously a bit of tension with the incentives of the workforce, which are pretty much antagonistic. Also, you may want to count the number of tensions I'm gonna show in this video, because holy shit, this video is gonna be one of Hegel's hottest wet dreams. However, one of its most promising resolution is through automation. Obviously, this is not ideal for the workforce, at least under capitalism, since we kind of need jobs to survive, but due to the very imbalanced power dynamics the bourgeoisie has with the proletariat, the interests of the capitalist class are most likely to be satisfied firsthand. On the other hand, IT departments kind of need funding for the research, and what better client will be than very wealthy companies who seek to reduce their organic workforce in profit of automation. It is therefore in the interest of IT departments to distribute more efficient and more polyvalent robots to these companies and institutions in order to raise their appeal for the IT department and hopefully getting sufficient funding for research purposes, which would also help produce more efficient robots that they could distribute to appeal to even more clients, etc. etc. This pretty much paints a virtuous cycle. However, there are obviously going to be security problems if there are too many clients, as the risk of hackers trying to meddle with the systems of these automation robots only increases with the number of clients. So there are multiple factors in tension again here as well. IT departments have to sell to as many clients as possible to get better funding, but not too much as to get hacked and possibly ruin their reputation, hence producing the exact opposite result as intended. To resolve that, they have the incentive to first distribute their robots to IT-related companies, as security failures could be blamed at least a little bit more easily on these clients instead of the distributors, but also because these companies know fully well that they could be scapegoated like that, so they have the incentive to implement their own proprietary or even patented hardware or anything of the sort, and all that to assure the security of their robots, so that hackers will have a harder time to even comprehend what the fuck they're hacking, notably. This would, however, have the effect of making these robots uniquely dependent on these companies, if they do stuff like that. Basically, like workers were more or less literally plugged to the company premises. This will definitely be a bit of an ethical problem if these robots ever get sentient, but for now, we don't forcefully care, right? Still, although IT-related companies have the possibility of making their own security shields in a way, restaurants and supermarkets usually don't, for example. So this sort of client-made security in a way won't really sustain all that much once they start distributing automation robots to a wider range of clients. Hence, IT departments and startups who distribute these will have two options, which again kind of raise tensions of all sorts. On one hand, they could distribute to as many clients as they want, but they'd have to make their robots pretty much unique to each client, and that could possibly be quite expensive, both in terms of research and for the companies, which may halt the latter to invest if they don't deem the profits sufficient, even on the long run. Also, there are a lot of competitive problems and stuff like that, but we're not going to get into that. On the other hand, they could distribute the same robots to each client, which once again could put themselves at risk of multi-targeted attacks if they have too many clients. But this will definitely be profitable to the companies they target, as long as, once again, they don't get tetra-fucked by hackers. I'm not even sure we can count how many tensions there are here, but it's like a fucking spectrum of tensions. But anyway, holy shit. Yet, I did say that making these robots unique to each client may be an obstacle to get investors. Because if they don't see why these robots are so expensive, they may not want them. This actually gives the incentive for the distributors to always find more and more efficient robots, and quite swiftly as well, since there's always the growing possibility of an impending crash, either literally or because a big security issue was exploited by hackers, or at least something of the sort, which will decredibilize the IT industry in the eyes of these investors. And that would be a fucking disaster for IT departments and distributors, usually. So that's why I'm guessing that if these distributors turn themselves to anything, it's gonna be machine learning or even beyond that. Probably beyond. But before we start talking about that, I didn't know how to put this anywhere, but I gotta talk about it, sorry. So, robots are already being distributed right now, even through very wide ranges of industries and institutions. So what we said until now has kind of already happened to some extent. I mean, it will keep on happening for each new big leap in technological progress in these fields. And that's what I'll talk about more thoroughly right after that. But obviously, every time there's something that's happening, something like that happening, every time there's something like that happening, sorry. Who's pretty much always on the case? Yeah, that's right, the army. And to a smaller extent, the police. They are also really good targets for these distributors, since the army and the police have a lot of funding. Most of it for pretty much no reason, but it will be bad. I mean, it will be too bad not to profit indirectly from it. However, I have a feeling that once these robots get just developed enough, the police will start trying to charge vandalism against these robots, not merely as vandalism anymore, but as voluntary homicides. And unfortunately, I think this is when the first mediatic, I don't know how the fuck you pronounce it, discussions about robot rights will start to emerge. And the proponents will be usually associated with being pro-police. Obviously, this will greatly impact a bunch of the far-left movements, and that may lead us to childishly oppose robot rights, just not to be associated with these pro-police movements. I mean, maybe not every single movement, since we're a good bunch to be programmed, for example, even if it's usually seen as a more conservative thing. I'm just saying, still, it will surprise me. But if we keep that going, just know that as robots get more and more sentient, if the far right gets to be their home, we're pretty much fucked as a species, no less. So I guess I'm just saying, we shouldn't let right-wingers be the face of robot rights movement. Anyway, let's get back to the technicalities, shall we? So, machine learning, especially deep learning, is usually used to solve very specific tasks, usually one at a time. So this is not really any different than robots which are made to do specific tasks as well, like regular ones. Especially in restaurants and places alike, it may not make a very significant difference. However, multitask machine learning is being investigated ever since the 90s. The main issue is that this kind of halted. The main issues that kind of halted the progress of this field, however, were pretty much hardware and storage problems. Indeed, such MLs, sorry, I know ML means Marxist Leninist, but know that when I say such MLs, in this video at least, I mean such machine learning tools, in this context, consume a lot of CPU, GPU, and other things I don't really know about. Yeah, sorry, I'm not a math person. I'm a math person, not a 91. That's what I mean. However, new progress in these areas show that machine learning may not really be suited to complex, task managing anyway, or at least not fully. In fact, the main problem with machine learning is that it can learn how to do specific tasks, as I did already, but it has a very poor ability to generalize to other tasks. I'll probably make another video about the specifics of that kind of stuff, because it's not really the subject, but just know that a lot of progress in ML is leading us to believe that in the near future, more efficient AIs may come from multiple techniques that go beyond regular deep learning, especially with what's called machine reasoning. I haven't found much on the subject still, so that's mainly why I'm refraining myself from talking about it a little bit more in this video, which already took a bit long to write anyway. But still, it shows that the idea of an AI that can learn practically anything, for example, is getting less and less of a science fiction scenario and more realistic. The advantage is very obvious here with such an AI, since we could use a single robot to make a lot of stuff, repurposing it to do newer tasks, instead of, having to get a new robot to do one thing at a time. This will drastically reduce the costs for maintenance, production, and all the things which, for once, gives an incentive on both sides of the distribution to profit off. Such good incentives, in fact. that these juicy in fact, could make this juicy market to get like quite crowded, you know, and more or less swiftly so, because it's so fucking and if the market works in the best way possible, lol, the prices for these robots will therefore decrease as the demand increases. But well, obviously, it rarely ever happens in real life, or at least not sufficiently so. More realistically, prices will become quite irrelevant, and distributing newer and safer material will become the real heart of the competition, more so than lowering prices. Either case, however, will still result in an incentive for these companies to throw away their older robots. And companies rarely ever truly give a shit about the environment. I think I'm teaching that to literally no one. So odds are these robots will be thrown pretty much anywhere, and probably in huge numbers. The vibrant, possibly booming market may therefore directly lead to very polluting consequences, as the amount of carcasses of robots thrown into nature will increase each day from this point on. Environmental activists will obviously be in the case sooner or later. Some of these robots may still be usable, some may not, since they were made with proprietary materials. The latter should be the unfortunate minority, as I kind of argued earlier. Not a lot of industries can allow themselves to do that kind of stuff. Only IT related ones usually. Hence, maybe we could counter the waste that these companies make from these deemed as obsolete robots by reusing them simply. Maybe to ally ourselves in climate activism, for example, maybe as a sort of technical progressive middle finger to these industries, and showing that robots deserve better treatment. Maybe a bunch of things all together, including the ones I talked about. Who the fuck knows anyway? Still, this might be the starting point of a widespread discussion about robot rights, and maybe even robot liberation on the left, a bit like anti-speciesism is doing for animal rights and liberation. That's obviously where I'm getting this idea, by the way. I did say dialectical and historical materialism, right? So, at some point, I'm pretty sure most of the people of our generation, like now in 2021, will look like reactionary boomers, still defending that robots don't deserve rights because they're not organic, they don't have feelings, or whatever ethereal bullshit tankies and right-wingers will be on about. But don't worry, that sentiment will also exist in anarchist movements. It's a shame, but I'm already seeing that kind of shit, actually. So maybe we should start acting a little bit, to push against this idea that we even have any fucking idea what conscious or feelings are, or that organic beings are somehow the only ones to have these, for example. Yeah, because if we keep making the same mistakes over and over again, a bit like the therapy second wave feminists are doing right now, then what's the fucking point of all these talks about prejudice, inclusion, etc.? Okay, sorry if these three last paragraphs were kinda weaker than the rest, but it's just that it will surprise me if this just goes this way. And this video is a bet after all, not a prediction. I hope it goes much better than that, but for now I have no fucking reason to think otherwise than what I presented here. Which is why I made this video in the first place. Sure, it's not a catastrophic scenario like you can hear, but it's still pretty fucking, I still hope I can spark some discussion on the matter at least. We all have very different pools of knowledge, so it will be just interesting to see where y'all's direct you to think instead. And, well, you will bet as a more likely scenario. Just remember, before you comment anything about, being against robots or anything, try to switch the labels sentient robot to disabled worker and figure out yourself if your argument still holds any water. As far as we know, there's no huge difference between them. And no, this is not an insult against disabled workers, it's just that a lot of arguments against sentient robots have a very ableist vibe. Obviously, I'm not talking about the arguments about, well, they don't need food or stuff like that. I mean, no, I mean, well, for once, yeah, robots don't need food and shit like that, but still. Anyway, so overall, I'd appreciate that y'all check that before commenting anyway. I'm sure I'm not the only neuroatypical and slightly disabled person who may very well relate to and even project themselves as the robots you're talking about. So yeah, thanks in advance. Also, yeah, this video is kind of tangentially related to singularitarianism, which is the idea that a technological singularity or superintelligence, whatever the fuck that means, is bound to exist at some point, and that we should do our best to prevent it from being, catastrophic. I mean, I swiftly talked about it in the transhumanism video, but I wanted to develop a little bit in this direction, hopefully giving a solid and rigorous introduction to the idea, even though that's just pretty much based on my experience, but what else can I do? I mean, I could have discussed with other people, which is what I did, but usually it didn't really give very useful discussions, if you see what I mean. Anyway, so there's a lot of disregard for the idea, even in AI departments. Even though it seems the vast majority of researchers kind of believe that a singularity is bound to happen before literally the century ends. And from the scenario I'm betting on, I guess it's kind of fitting. But, well, just whatever. Let's get this video done already. I'm fucking done. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good praxis, comrades. See ya.